Welcome everyone to Tiger Club Radio episode 181. I'm your host, Critical Failure. This week, we're going to be talking about the classic Nintendo being discontinued. That news is broken a week ago now, so I'm sure you're tired of hearing it. But we'll do my take on it, and then we'll go from there. I wanted to get the most objective thought of the situation as I could, so I didn't go for any of the normal gaming sites. I pulled a story from Business Insider, hoping to just get the tech angle on the idea, the tech market angle on why they would pull it. It was the dumbest thing I think I've ever done because they offered no real insight. What I instead got was a list of 10 reasons that we all kind of knew. Perhaps just being inside or paying as close attention to the games industry as we do as gamers. None of this stuff was new, but we'll go over the list that they provided as well as my thoughts on the subject. Let's start things off with some chip tunes before we dig into that. This is called Zelda's Got a Tick-Height. Zelda's got a tick-height? I don't know. Don't know what the name is. Zelda's got a tick-height. Alright, I'll put the link. It's a good track. Got it off of chipmusic.org. So if you want to get yourself a copy of the MP3, head on down to the link in the description and get yourself a copy of that MP3. You guys listen to Tiger Claw Radio, episode 181. That is an awesome, awesome track, and I'm very sorry that I derped up the name. However, head on down to the description, get yourself a copy of the MP3. All right, boys and girls, we're gonna do the Vancast because I've got no energy right now, but I managed to pull off a really good Vancast. Bear with me. You're listening to Nope, I'm not gonna do it over. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. All right. Pulling out of the driveway, it's a crisp, I don't know what the temperature is, but it's 62, 6:22 in the morning. I can see the sun has just peeked over the horizon, and we have that really nice, sort of velvety blue first hours of sunlight. And the air outside is chilly, but nice. Like, I have a hoodie on, and that's clearly enough. And I am on my way to work. I just pulled out of the driveway. We are having a good morning. It's Tuesday morning here on TCR on the Vancast. I hope you guys are having a good day as well. So, let's talk about the big news this week, which I've no doubt talked about already, which is the Nintendo pulling the NES Classic from the shelves. I was a little shocked at this, but at the same time, it's like classic Nintendo, right? Never enough hardware to go around. That seems to be the Nintendo mantra. Now, the article that I read, which was pure speculation, stated one particular fact that I find interesting, and it's that Nintendo is really protective of its classic games. I think that much was evident at the very beginning when they decided to put only 30 games on the machine. But this is kind of shocking. I think the NES Classic, even though I was never interested from the beginning, I think it was the most interesting, or the most I've considered buying a Nintendo console new off the line for a long time. At least for myself anyway. That's not counting, buying, prospect of buying like a Wii U or a Switch or something like that for my son. For me, the NES Classic was the most I came in a long time. But when it first came out, I held the opinion that this was a great console, or a console that would have been great 10 years ago. And that's what I thought when it came out. That's still kind of what I think. Now we have the Raspberry Pi, so it seems like Nintendo really needed to get out in front of this this need for classic games, right? Back in the when would I say 1999, 2000 at the latest, that was really the time. Okay, that was when I first discovered a program called Nesticle. And what I was doing was I was playing NES ROMs on a computer when I had no internet connection at home. So I would take 3 1/4 inch floppy disks over to my friend's house, and I would load a 3 1/4 inch floppy, which held 1.66 megabytes, which I think is what it cleared, or 1.62 megabytes. After formatting, it was like a megabyte and a half, a little over a megabyte and a half. I'd load it up with games. Now, I can't remember exactly how many would fit, but it really depended on the games, because Nintendo games are, when it comes to ROMs, are anywhere from like maybe 22 kilobytes for some of the simpler games, like Mappy or Milk and Nuts or something like that, all the way up to, almost 500K. Not that much, but I think the biggest one is like 222K or something. It's been a lot of years since I looked at file size. But like Super Mario Brothers 3, and those are some of the bigger games. Those file sizes at that time really made a difference because they had an impact on how many games I could take home. And thus, I would go and I would get maybe, we'll round it off to between 10 and 15. 10 and 15 ROMs. And those are really my ROMs for the week, right? Now, during that era, they could have released this machine for $100, and I think it would have been successful. Now, maybe that was too tall an order for Nintendo, given where hardware was at that time. But strictly speaking about the market, that would have put them out in front of this ROMs and emulation thing that they're stating is the biggest threat to their intellectual property. It would have put them out in front of it. There should have been some sort of backwards compatibility during that time. We didn't see backwards compatibility for the NES all the way up until the Wii came out. I mean, we saw the Nintendo 64, we saw the GameCube. None of that had any backwards compatibility to the NES. At that time, the only backwards compatibility I can think of was the device for the Game Boy Advance called the e-reader. Right? You guys remember that? That was a machine where you would get a pack of cards, like baseball cards almost, and these cards had barcodes on them, and you could swipe the barcodes one at a time to load a game, and then you could play a handful of classic NES games that way. Alright, as dumb as that sounds, I really, really wanted an e-reader for my Game Boy Advance, and I still would love to have one, because I think that, honestly, is like Nintendo at the peak of its creativity. I think that displays like the full amount of Nintendo's creative potential when it comes to technology, because they had those classic NES games, but if you ever bought Pokemon cards, there were certain scannable Pokemon cards that you could then slice through an e-reader and get some sort of, I don't know what they gave you, but it had to be some sort of interactive benefit. And I think that was amazing. That concept of having trading cards that you could then swipe and play. All right, just going to throw this out there because I know somebody's going to bring it up if I don't say it. You could, in theory, fire up a printer and take advantage of the e-reader with a printer, right? Printing out whatever and swiping it. I don't know exactly how the technology worked. Let's assume that that you could. Suppose you could create homebrew games, convert them to binary coded into the magnetic strip or however the strip was read, and print and swipe homebrew games. It boggles the mind how amazing that could have been. To this day, see, when the e-reader came out, and I know I'm a million miles away from what I want to be talking about, what I set out to be talking about. When the e-reader came out, I thought it was so cool, and the people around me who had sense were like, that's going to be a failure. And I was trying to think of it with sensible eyes, like, okay, after this thing fails, I'll come to my senses and I'll know it was dumb. Now I just wish I bought one while they were still like $20 or whatever they were. Okay, so the e-reader was amazing technology, but that's we're talking about Nintendo and its backwards compatibility. That was what made me want to buy a Wii when it came out. The Wii was the introduction of this virtual console idea, and man, they dropped the ball hard with the virtual console. Woo! Man, they dropped the ball hard. This idea of trying to maximize sales by slowly trickling games out one at a time. Now, I know what you're going to say. It's because of licensing issues, this and that and the other. Licensing. And I'll admit, licensing is complicated. When you have a game that came out 20 years ago, you got to find out who owns the rights. You can't just start selling it immediately. Some of the games like Earthbound or whatever had music in it that had to be altered to fit changing licenses, right? Punch-Out, right? If you go buy Punch-Out for the Virtual Console, what is that like? Do you get Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, or do you get the one that came out after they lost the Mike Tyson license expired? Standardized Punch-Out with Mr. Dream at the end. Which one do you get? Licensing is difficult, but I'm going to call BS on the idea that licensing was the only reason why the Virtual Console dropped the ball. The reason why is because they did not immediately release Super Mario Bros. 1 through 3. That's it. That is the smoking gun that proves they tried to market this thing with a trickle effect. And that's what we see here with the NES Classic. We see they could have made it do more than they did.
And that's ultimately what got me upset with the NES Classic. We already have the Raspberry Pi. I mean, I want you to understand about the Raspberry Pi. Number one, it does not take $100 to get that thing up and running. And B, number two, I'm going to go with letters and numbers in this one. It does not take a lot of know-how to get it up and running either. All you need is the Pi for $35. You need a micro SD card, which you can get really, really tiny. You can get a 2 gig, and that'll hold all you need if you're just trying to play NES games, right? You need a cell phone charger. So how much does a cell phone charger cost? I have a Galaxy S5, and a branded charger for that is $10. But you can use, you can take your Kindle charger or whatever. So we're gonna call it $5. So $35 for the machine, we'll say $5 for a charger. And you need a case, which will give you a healthy $10 budget for a case. Okay, so we're up to $50 for a charger, the machine, and the case. Another $5 for the SD card. That should be everything, right? Yes, you'll probably want a USB keyboard, but just unplug the one from the computer that you have and plug it in and make all your settings, and you won't need it anymore. So I'm not going to include that in the budget, because I didn't buy a new one with mine back when mine was up and running. So call it $55, $55 to $60. Exactly the same price as the NES Classic. And you have the Raspberry Pi running RetroPie, which not only does NES games, but Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Sega's marvelous history in classic games and all that. The existence of this technology, and not just the existence of the technology, but the fact that it's so easily accessible, and Nintendo's $60 for 30 games with its tiny little cable that it gave the controllers, it's kind of insulting. It's kind of insulting. I felt insulted when it came out. I was like, really? We know the Raspberry Pi exists. It's not like a secret machine, When I went to MagFest, they had a Raspberry Pi set up in the console room for everyone to play. It was plugged into. They had built an arcade stick, a long arcade stick with two ports, made for two people, almost like one of those Arcade X rigs, and it was made out of marble. And essentially, all it was a Raspberry Pi. It was running RetroPie, and it had a ton of MAME games on it. There you go. So that's how I feel about the NES Classic. I feel like Nintendo did not give us a quality product to begin with. I think if you bought an NES Classic, there's one of a couple of reasons. One, you don't know what a RetroPie is, or how to get RetroPie up and running on a Raspberry Pi. That's number one, which I don't blame you. Number two, you wanted it because it was shaped like an NES. I'm right. You wanted it because it was shaped like an NES. Whoop-de-doo. I hope it was worth it. You can buy a case for the Raspberry Pi that's shaped like an NES. That I think is the most offensive idea, is that the NES was this machine, the original one, that could do everything. It could play all the Nintendo games, right? So the experiences you could have on an NES, provided that you could get your hands on the cartridges, was far and above. It was out of this world, right? You could think of an NES game. You could play that on an NES. And here they have the visage of an NES that can do what is. Let's do the math. What is 30 out of 700, right? 3/70ths? Isn't that how you reduce that fraction? 3/70ths, roughly, of the Nintendo library. Come on, Nintendo. I get it that it was a toy and it wasn't a console, but I was angry when it came out, and I'm not surprised to see it go. The best that I can say for the NES Classic was I know there was people out there who are not into video games who just remember a little Mario Brothers when they were a kid who bought one of these things. To those people, and I believe those people alone, except those people and maybe small children, to those people I say Godspeed, and I hope you got your hands on one. But the NES, the collector, the modern collector who's now in their 30s, who's looking at Nintendo products and saying, I gotta have one of those, you know, the kind of people who make the YouTube videos where they have a shelf of gaming hardware and whatever behind them, you guys didn't need one of these. Nintendo shortchanged you from the very beginning with the NES Classic. Alright? I'm trying to look at Nintendo and their moves here with as much objectivity as possible. Right? Because number one, I realize in my older age I'm more of a PC guy, and I have unfortunately developed somewhat of a fanboyism, and I know everybody else who listens to this show is rolling their eyes very hard, because it's like, yeah, we know. Little fanboyism towards the PC, it happens, right? I like that I can still fire up my MS-DOS games, and it works just fine. It's a backwards compatibility that I think consoles really need to address more than they have. I don't know. I was going somewhere with that, but the train of thought kind of got derailed because it's not even 7 in the morning yet, and I'm still out on the road. Let's address Sega and their plug and plays. I haven't purchased the Sega plug and play that came out around the same time as the NES, but I'm going to tell you something about that plug and play that I saw that makes me all right with it. It's got a cartridge slot. All right? I'm going to say that again. It has a cartridge slot. It's okay if it's overcharged for a tiny fraction of the Sega Genesis library. It's really okay. Because I can put my actual cartridge in it. Does it have Skitchin on it? I like that game. Skitchin, you guys remember that? Where it played a lot like 2 Extreme on the PlayStation, or maybe ESPN Extreme Sports. But you would grab on the back of cars and ride rollerblades back when rollerblading was cool. I liked that game. Is it on the Sega plug and play? I have no idea. But if it isn't, that's okay. Because I got the cartridge, I can put it in and I'm good to go. I feel like the inclusion of that cartridge slot, whatever they had to go through to get that put on there, I feel a little bit more respected as a collector. I don't know. I think that sounds weird, but I don't know. I feel like I got the middle finger just a little bit less when they put that out. So those are my thoughts on the plug and plays. If you have one and you've enjoyed it, let me know, because I know people have bought them, but what I haven't heard, these words I've not heard once since the NES Classic came out. You ready? And if you've heard anybody say these words, anybody at all, even if it's somebody you watch on YouTube and you don't know them personally, I want you to tell me, this is what I've never heard anybody say. I bought an NES Classic and I play it all the time. I've never heard that. Right? And that's excluding people who figured out how to hack it and just use it as an overpriced Raspberry Pi. Right? And if you're doing that, I kind of get that one a little bit. Because then you have, the Raspberry Pi doesn't interface with the Wii controllers the same way the NES Classic does. You'd have to buy an adapter to make it do that. I mean, you can do it, but you'd have to buy an adapter. And I looked into it, actually. The adapter to make a Wii external controller work, that is like a Wii Classic controller. It's like $20, $25 or $30 or something like that. I did look into it because I have a Wii arcade stick, and I wanted to see what it would take to get that running on a Pi. It can be done, but if you bought a Raspberry Pi, all the stuff to make it work, and this adapter, it would then cost more than an NES Classic. So if you bought it to use your NES or your Wii externals, okay, that I get. You buy, okay. Actually, this is unlocking the door to some new thought here. Suppose you have like a pro gamepad or whatever they call the gamepad that you bought for the Wii that you plugged in at the bottom and used it to play Super Nintendo games. Suppose you had that controller. That controller changed names over the years, right? I bought the first one that came out, and then they changed the names and put like wings on it like a PlayStation controller, so I don't know what it's called anymore. Suppose you bought that, and that is what you wanted to use, and that alone. That would make more financial sense to buy an NES Classic and hack it, I guess, if that's what you wanted to do. That's the only situation I can think of. I would never do that, but I can say that those were quality controllers. And I know some people put a lot more time into their Wiis than I did. So, I don't know. That's one plausible scenario. I'd be interested to hear other plausible scenarios. We have a video on YouTube on the trending section that spends 15 minutes explaining why the cars from Disney Pixar's Cars are actually insects. I think this is a less far-reaching theory than that. So that's my theory about how the NES Classic could possibly have been a valuable purchase. I don't know, but I do know that those things are going to be really expensive in the future, if they're not already. You know, if you wanted to go buy one now, good luck. Jeez, that part hurts. That's the part that hurts. People are saying, you know, to imagine somebody saying, I want to get an NES Classic, and I can't because they're too expensive. At that point, I don't know. That's where my PC fanboyism kicks in. Because I don't have to pay anything to go get DOSBox and go backwards compatibility on PC stuff. I do not have to pay anything. Oh boy. But alright. I can tell, I can feel it that I'm soapboxing real hard on this one. But I wanted to soapbox a little bit. Because when it comes to Nintendo, when it comes to those NES years and them evoking the memory of those years in order to sell products, those are the years I have strong emotional ties to, and I feel like a lot of gamers my age do. And if not, then you probably have them to something else that was on the market at the time, right? Like if you were if you had the Master System, right, which I'm told a lot of kids in Europe did. Well, that's what they're doing. You know, if you remember playing, you know, ice hockey on NES, and you go play it now, a good portion of what you're doing is really trying to recapture what you felt and what you did at the time. This is a completely normal thing, and it's also a normal thing that products be sold to do that. You know, using nostalgia to manufacture and sell products, that happens, right? We're human beings. We remember things. We get older, and it helps us cope with getting older, to realize, you know, to recapture, at least in little teaspoon doses, our past. The problem is, if you're handling those kinds of memories and feels, the feelings, if you're messing around with my feels, you got to do it right, man. You can't be reckless with people's feels, because people get upset. It's like, imagine if they had made a better NES Classic, one with a cartridge slot, and say 100 ROMs on it, one that was really a powerhouse, but they charged $300 for it, right? Wouldn't that make you mad that exists? I don't know. Now I'm really reaching. All right, here's the really short version of this entire segment. Okay, super short version. Ready? Go out and buy that HD NES that people are buying now. The third-party HD NES that just plays cartridges in HD. That's what you buy. All right. I think we can close it. We can close the case on this one. All right. I'm almost at the office now. Holy crap, that was really long. That was 25 minutes. My goodness. I set out to make this a short vancast because I didn't have a whole lot else apart from this NES thing to talk about. Ugh. So I hope this wasn't too painful to listen to. If you're still with us, then thank you very much. All right, I'm out.
You guys are listening to Tiger Claw Radio. All right, so the next track we got is from an artist called Grim, and this is Gemstone. Top-notch music this week. Remember to check us out on Patreon. The patrons are getting the shows first as soon as I can get them done. All right, that's enough of that. This is Gemstone from Grim on Tiger Claw Radio. I think I was asked the question very recently, whatever happened to GNet Radio? I think that might have been in a personal email, so I won't bother trying to remember who asked it to me, but I thought I would just go over that. GNet Radio, for those of you who don't remember, was a network that I was part of for a very brief amount of time many years ago. They were running, like, if you guys remember Shoutcast, remember what Shoutcast is? They were running a live streaming 24-hour radio network, essentially, over the internet. And me and a few of our friendly podcasts all jumped on board. I believe Gooch and the Douchebag, although I don't quite remember, jumped on board. I know Sendu at the time and his gang, they jumped on board. Kaiser jumped on board. We all had shows on GNet, on GNet Radio. We were promised additional traffic. You know, we're going to play you guys. You guys will make it in the rotation, right? And they had the things that they wanted us to do to be part of that were actually very nominal. They just had a couple of promos. They had like a big folder, like 21 or 30 promos. You're like, look, just listen to these, pick one or two that you like, run them when you can, just help us cross promote. And at the time, I was like, you know what, I'm digging it, because they weren't like corporate ads. They were just like guys who made little cuts of other shows. Get a little, I felt like that was something I could really, break up the show a little bit, help some human beings. So we kind of went with that for a while, but there was no increase in traffic at all when we were going through that process. So I can't remember exactly where I checked out. I think it was just that I was not getting an increase in traffic, and the production time was taking longer. So that was what caused me to drop out from GNet Radio. At the end of it, the last people to go were like Sendu and Kaiser. I seem to remember that being like the early roots of Kaiser being a live personality, because he was doing DJing and stuff at the time. But I just kind of got out. I got out because it was taking too much extra time to work there. After I left, I wanted to make it work, because I thought it being part of like a Shoutcast station was super awesome. But I heard after we left, they wanted to impose like an exclusivity deal with potential podcasts, so they lost all their support. But the reality was they didn't have an audience, so nobody stuck around. They could have really thrown their weight around with us if they were drawing people in to listen, and it would have been a different story. But I don't know. I was glad I did it though, because it was an experience. And that was GNet Radio. That was a long time ago. Quite a few years ago, actually. They have, the last time I thought about GNet Radio, I looked them up and they had since gone. So, ancient history. Let's return to this. Oh, that's right. I was going to go over this business article. Nintendo. Let's see. We'll do the list. Why not? Why not? I'll read this list and we'll just see what we think. This is from the Business Insider, businessinsider.com. And their article entitled 5 Reasons Nintendo is Discontinuing Its Ridiculously Popular $60 Game Console, the NES Classic. Now, keep in mind that this is not a video games periodical, and all of these reasons we know already. Reason number 1, the NES Classic Edition was never intended to be a product, rather a commercial. Most people who are trying to look at this thing as objectively as possible. I heard more than one person say it's a toy, it's not a console. Don't know what I think about that. So that's one reason that they list here. Number 2, Nintendo has a history of creating collector's items. As of now, the NES Classic Edition is a collector's item. The problem is, though, how are they going to make money off of that? I mean, they're not making any more. How does it help them if people are buying them for super expensive from third parties? I don't think that's the reason at all. Number 3, here's one that I think is real. Nintendo has a new console to sell that costs much more than $60. That's a much bigger risk. It wants you to pay attention to the Nintendo Switch. Now we're getting to the real reasons. I think that's what's going on. $30 at $5 a piece is going to cost you, or 30 games at $5 a piece is going to cost you much more than $60. And I think that's what it boils down to. They want you to buy all those ROMs individually off the Virtual Console, and that's it. Number 4, Nintendo is extremely protective of its classic games. That's right. Nintendo does have a really anti-ROMs attitude, which is kind of weird how they haven't really made any attempt to get that market share for themselves, apart from their ridiculous Virtual Console pricing. Number 5, here's what I was just talking about. Number 5, Nintendo wants to sell you classic games on the Switch. So yeah, all that stuff we kind of, whatever. Nothing, Business Insider isn't telling us anything about Nintendo that we couldn't just all figure out ourselves from being people who actually buy and consume these products over time. However, I will put a link to the article if you want to check it out. Hey, maybe I'm missing something. You never know. You never know. But it is a thing. What am I playing? I keep notes about what I play over the week, and the reason why is because the things that I play when I sit down and do hey, what have you been playing lately? That's really the way to give you something you can't get from reading like a Wikipedia article, right? So it's things that I experienced and felt, and sometimes it's more often than not it's usually just little hen picks. I played this, played that. I played Postal Redux, which I hate. I hate it when designers use that word in their games, but it was down to $1 on one of the bundle sites in the Bundleverse. And I picked it up. I was a big fan of the original Postal. Now, the original Postal was available on. It was the first game I ever bought on GOG.com. I've mentioned that many times on the show. I bought it when it came out on Steam at one point, not right away, but they fixed the controls at some point. So like that now, when you go buy even the original Postal, it's an updated version, and Postal Redux is an even more updated version. I didn't really care for it. I had issues with the loading. It got hung up a few times loading when the original version did not. In the original version, you would press F1 once you satisfied the mission to move to the next level. They added now you got to walk all the way across the map to the exit. Yeah, whatever. I don't know. I didn't care for it, but I bought it. I played it. Postal is It's funny to me how dumb that game is, because I remember being young and my friend telling me, hey, there's this game where all you do is kill people and it's banned. It's called Postal. What? Really? So I did that. I played Sega Rally on the Dreamcast once, which is like, there are better racing games. At the time, I mean, the Dreamcast was cutting edge, but that's tough to go back to. I didn't play Sega Rally when it was new. I played it long after the fact, so it doesn't hold the place in my heart, as other games do. Last game I have on here is I've been trying to play Cave Story, but I have something on my joystick. Like my arcade sticks, like the buttons are sticky, so I gotta open those up and clean those out. So even though I have it on this list, it's more on this list because I want to talk about using the Kenba arcade stick rather than the Grabus Gamepad Pro, which is what I had been playing. I had been using the Grabus Gamepad Pro just because I got one for like $3 at a thrift store, and I was actually setting it up so that I could play while lying in bed. And I just decided, I don't know, that's just not the way I want to do it. I've really probably been playing the most. What is it called? Trackmania Valley, which I got like last week or a couple weeks ago. I played that a few times. I got a couple of gamepads out and did some split screen with my son, which was a lot of fun. Very recently, I think that was the very last time I played video games, actually. All right, we're 42 minutes in. Look, guys, I'm hanging on by a thread. Okay, wife's got a broken leg, so I'm doing more work around the house than I ever thought possible. I have no energy, so I'm going to go right to the fail bag, because you guys out there have saved my bacon on many occasions. And basically the way this works is I head over to the fail bag and I read the comments, and I hope to Lord that I can fill the rest of the show. Oh man, because it's 9 p.m. on Friday, and this is typically out already for the patrons on Patreon by now. But let's give it a shot. So I'm navigating right now. You're hearing hot live navigation action over to my ever-shrinking YouTube channel. Let's see. TCR 180. Okay. Death Adder, YouTube Savior writes, I finally clicked the Steam icon on my laptop, and I've been playing every 16-bit freeware game that my tender little laptop can handle. I've taken a liking to the collectible card games. It's nice to play them without having to look at a guy in front of you with their neck beard, all bearded and sweat dew. Any recommendations? Also, why does Kaiser's face appear next to every single booby game? Well, Death Adder, that's sometimes it's difficult to know when I'm supposed to actually answer your questions, because I'm never quite sure if I'm being trolled or not. 100% orange juice is very enjoyable, although not at all freeware. Let's see. I tried to play Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed this morning also. Didn't work out too well. Doesn't read the controllers very well. But I hear those games are dope if you can get it to work. Let's stick with that. Let's stick with that. 100% Orange Juice is a really good game. I would recommend that. Alright. So now we move on to Alex Swingle, who has a nice big comment. And then after that, I think we have some backlog comments we can go over. He writes, minute 13, the infamous timestamp of wasted seconds, trademark. I got to navigate back to this. Hang on a second. All right. I have no idea what that means. I have to go back to minute 13 and see what you meant by that. Unless I actually said without thinking, hosted by Wasted Seconds, because I used to say that on the show. That's probably the reason why I have a couple episodes that are lost, because I used to use an FTP, log in and dump the shows there, and I have a couple of shows that are just missing now, and that's probably what happened. They were uploaded to Wasted Seconds, and then when it went down, those couple of shows just never got backed up. Number 2, at minute 17, no sir, you mersed onto the highway. I got him. So dangerous. The only thing I can think of that's more dangerous that I've done before in my life is tried to eat Pringles while driving. You know, that where you do that move where you turn the can sideways and try and get the bottom few Pringles. I've done that with my knee on the steering wheel to try and get the bottom Pringles off. This is the dumbest thing I think I've ever done. All right. Number 3, for old standbys, surprise, surprise, I'm going to gush about Warzone 2100. I played that game on the PS1 for close to 200 hours. Then I discovered it was also released for PC, and I beat the campaign again, taking nearly 40 hours as I rebuilt my Grand Castle 3 times in a row per new location. I don't even play it when I'm in that feeling of gaming. I play it in I play it back in my head, and I can almost recite some of the dialogue verbatim. Welcome, Commander. You have joined Central Command at an opportune time. Scavengers are approaching from the east to seize our weapons factory, and will likely not stop until you bring the hammer down. That's cool, man. At minute 37, that happened to me, where my internet went out for an entire day, as if it wasn't for me thinking ahead and preserving the files. I would have no adult material to excite my senses, if you know what I'm saying, and I think you do. At number 5, I tend to comment on every other podcast so as not to hog the spotlight. As much as I enjoy hearing the sound of my own poetry, my narcissistic behavior isn't that obscene. At least I hope that is true. So thanks much to Swingle and to Death Adder for being my saviors and giving me a couple comments to work with. So what do we got here? Warzone 2100. I think I have heard you talk about that in the past. When you write this here, it sounds really cool, like cool enough to check out. But here's my question for you, Alex. How do you know you put close to 200 hours on the PS1? I've only ever played one PS1 game where I could tell you how many hours it was, and that was Rage Racer, because it used to count the hours in your save file. And I remember, weirdly enough, for some reason, when it reached 11, I got freaked out because it was like, oh, it's the 11th hour. And when it rolled over to 11, I didn't want to save. I wanted to let it keep playing so that it would go 8, 9, 10, and then 12, which is the dumbest thing in the world. But I was like, I don't know, I was in 6th grade or something at that time. But Rage Racer is an amazing game. Yeah, so how do you know it was 200 hours? Is that an estimate? I want backed up numbers here. What else did you have here? Okay, yeah. So having the internet go out is a bummer. If it happened to me now, I've got GOG games and ROMs and stuff socked away, so I'll be good on that front. And it does happen. I mean, less often does the internet go out, but once in a while, Steam goes down, and then what happens? Then you can't access your rentals. So, or like when I was really deep into Street Fighter V for that period of time, and their servers would go down for maintenance. At that time, it was just as well. It's just as if the internet went down. Okay, where are we at now? Okay, so we got some comments from Darabka from some backlog episodes. Let's go over a couple of these. By the way, while I'm bringing this up, I run a webcomic now. I've wanted to start a webcomic for a long time. I even did a few primitive webcomics years ago, but now I run a comic called Stare at the Walls, and it's something I'm still trying to get off the ground. I'm basically experimenting, just doing a little of this, a little of that, but I'm posting it on TigerClawTV.com right now, and I'm primping it to be a feature on the next round. I don't think it's there yet. It's really, really bad MS Paint art, but I'm still kind of getting a routine down, figuring out how I can make it better and if it's feasible. But I do have it if you want to check it out in its early stages, and I added the strips that I had left over from previous works. So I had some Super Mega Comics submissions that I sent in. Those have been re-uploaded and stuff. So that's pretty neat. I'm actually pretty proud of what it is so far, even though it's super, super duper primitive. I've always been that way. I've been the really punk rock. I want everything as primitive as possible. So I don't know. Maybe that means bad, but whatever. I'll leave that to you to decide. If I head over to Tiger Claw Radio, and then let's do comments. Okay. I gotta move this because I can't read it. Alright. There we go. Now I've accessed the treasure trove. Uh-oh. My browser's not responding now. Okay. There's a bunch of these. Alright, so on episode, we're going to start from the most recent and work our way back. Episode 175. I've only started the first tutorial on Click Team, but I enjoy the ease of the system so far. I want to make a small game with it and see how it goes. I'll keep you in the know for sure. I've wanted to comment earlier, but I have kind of my own. I've been kind of down in the dumps lately. However, it was fun catching up on all the TCR goodness. It really motivates me to make some Beastcast. I like the idea of playing old games on old monitors. I remember when my cousin played Prince of Persia on the C65 on the old black and white Commie TV or the old giant tube. Good times. I hope the entry for the new Greenlight replacement won't be too high. I still want to publish a game there one day, even if it's just freeware. And I'm a bit sad the abandonware scene was semi-killed by GOG, but it was a scene that helped GOG's popularity. However, there are plenty of odd and weird old games and freeware titles, so it's still there. Abandonia is still active. They even have a PDF magazine. I didn't know that. Very cool. I loved the fighting game wave of the 1990s. Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter were the kings of the genre, but I remember oddballs like Clay Fighter and Primal Rage and others. Injustice and MK9 were newer fighting games I still enjoyed. I still want to get a PS2 for all the fighting games I missed, especially the Soul Calibur and MK games. I think you mentioned Earthbound here on another podcast, and you said it didn't do it for you. I agree to an extent. I played it through, and while the combat is boring and repetitive, the ending was pretty weird and epic. They did manage to make something unique. However, with all that said, it's overhyped and it doesn't deserve the astronomical price they ask for the cartridge. I still enjoyed it though, even with its flaws. Question of the week: what type of game would you make if you would have the time and money to do it, regardless of scope? Keep on trucking, man. All right, so for Click Team, I found out that when you create an object in the Click Team, you can get access to objects that aren't there to begin with. So you click the manager, and there's a bunch of extensions that you can download and install, and one of them is like a platform physics one, which is the reason why just bare going into it, you couldn't figure out how to program platforming physics. They are there. You don't have to do it one step at a time, but it is doable. I'm worked with Click Team a little bit. It's just when my wife broke her leg, it's just all that extra time just disappeared. It just disappeared. I took that review copy of Franchise Hockey Manager 3. I have no idea how I'm going to fulfill that contract. Or I guess contract isn't the right word, but I want to make that review. I really do, and I put some time into it. But all the time is gone. So when that happened, Click Team kind of went up in smoke for now. As for what game I would make a game like I want to make a modern knockoff of Jill of the Jungle. That's what I see when I see my dream game. Like Mori, what was sort of a modern MS-DOS game. I would do it a lot like Mori, but instead of being that like Aqua CGI kind of stuff, it would be a bit more colorful, a bit more early EGA. I'd make a spiritual successor to Jill of the Jungle. It would have 3 episodes. You would just have access to the 3 episodes just right off the bat. Because let's face it, if it was made back in those days, the first episode was probably shareware, and then the other 2 you had to order. So then in the subsequent amount of time, it would just have been ripped off and thrown in the abandonware area. So I would release it so that there would be the 3 episodes. The first one would say the word shareware on it, and then the other 2 would just be there. That's what I would do. I would also make it so that when you exited the game, it showed some ASCII art. You know how like in MS-DOS, when you left a DOS program, a lot of them had those exit screens? I would put one of those. I'd find some way to emulate the exit screen in Windows. So that's what I would do. You mentioned, let's see, I'll touch briefly on the fighting games you mentioned. PS2 has some cool fighting games. It kind of seems like a lot of the ones that are worthwhile are super duper expensive, but they're not all like that. I mean, there's King of Fighters, a couple titles there. I don't really own any cool fighting games on the PS2, but I agree with you. There do seems to be some cool ones. I've searched before. Soul Calibur you can get on the Dreamcast. I got it there. Let's see. So awesome. Thanks for the comment, man. That's the longest one. There's a couple more here. Is it the longest one? Yeah, we got a couple more. Mass Effect Andromeda looked abysmal, especially for a AAA game. I'm with you, man. I've been playing indie games with small followings for years now. I still enjoy the occasional big title. Scrim and the latest XCOM. But I haven't been hyped for modern games really because they're such unfinished, cringy messes at times. And I totally agree with what you said about GOG. I've been enjoying playing the old games recently. Finally managed to play through the first Myst, and I've been playing Blood 1 and Wing Commander 1 too. Woo woo! Nice games. Very, very nice. I've been playing Mountain Blade with Fire and Sword, listening to the cast. I would say Mountain Blade has a decent sized following, but I wouldn't consider it a AAA game. I'm with you. I might be wrong though. I also have problems with games being very samey. It has the same ideas or licenses we've seen countless times because those big money guys want a guaranteed hit with no... It's funny, the comment he writes with no experimentation, but for whatever reason, in my head, when I got to that word, my head jumped to excrement. So that's how I'm going to read it. We'll jump back a second, I'll read it. I'll read it as such. Because those big money guys want a guaranteed hit, no excrement, no ideas for themes or genres. The indie scene still has way more fresh ideas, even if they're not all fleshed out. Anyways, keep fighting the good fight, bro. Thanks again for the comment. Mountain Blade are published by Paradox. That's kind of the way I look at those games. It's really not fair to classify them as grand strategy, but that's just the way in my head I put them. They're not AAA, but they definitely have the funding of a publisher, and they definitely have a following. Would we call them a AA game, maybe? If that's a thing? If we could call games AA, I would say Mountain Blade are AA games, and thank the Lord for that. Yeah, Mass Effect Andromeda is a joke. It's an absolute joke. You played through Myst. Awesome, man. Good for you. Myst is really cool. Alright, we got one more here that I'm going to dart through. Splatterhouse is definitely old school levels of hard. I like it, but it gets frustrating very quick. I usually play scrolling beat-em-ups on MAME. I really dig them. I wish we could play more arcade games together online. Metal Slug did work well, though. I'm catching up on some quality TNR content, so expect comments on your latest episodes. I haven't commented on. I need to get to the hype train. Okay, yeah, it's a small typo here. Threw me off. Excuse me. I need to get on the hype train that is VidMe now myself. Question of the week. What fighting game series did you like better back in the day? Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, or something else? I mean, pre-internet days as you defined it. Keep on trucking, broski. Pre-internet days as I defined it. All right. So Mugen is off the table because I played Mugen before broadband internet days, but I got that on the internet. Pre-internet days, the most fun I ever had with a fighting game was the first Darkstalkers game. My brother bought Darkstalkers for the PS1, and I mained Bishaman, and he mained Felicia, and we had some epic battles. We really did. But he got super good with Felicia. Like, I couldn't, to the point where it was like I couldn't touch him. And then he got Darkstalkers 3, and when they made the transition from 1 to 3 on the PS1, they changed the Bishaman character, and I couldn't get used to how they changed him. So I was able to keep playing because I switched to Pyron. Pyron's like the boss of the game, though. So I don't know. I had to play as the boss of the game in order to hold a candle. And I don't know. He still wiped the floor with me. However, it was probably the most fun I had with a fighting game in those days. My friends were mostly the fighting game guys, so I played I played fighting games on standby. Like when I went to friends' houses and they had games running, that's how I played. Probably the best fighting games of my life were played that way. That's how I played Night Warriors on the Sega Saturn. One that I go back, a memory that I go back to quite often is playing Virtual On Cyber Troopers. That counts as a fighting game, right? I played that in the arcade at like $1 a play or 50 cents a play or whatever. Now, yeah, $1. It was $1 a play, which is a lot in those days. That's a good game. All right. Thank you very much for the comments, Sean Darabka, Gaming Beast. My good friend, I hope you're doing well. You mentioned that you had some issues being down in the dumps. I want you to know that we're all rooting for you. Not just me, but everyone here at the next round. I'm not going to say get better, because that's not how depression works. But I am going to say don't give up. Just keep doing what you got to do. And lastly, I want to say something to my boy Dumaze. Goodness, I know I say that wrong every time, don't I? Don't tell me how you say it, because I want to keep trying. This guy left some really good comments on episode 178, I believe. I don't know, I can't see the number. He talked about Bayonetta and some stuff. And I've got 6 comments from him, and I want to go over these. But I'm barely hanging on, and we're an hour in, so I'm going to hang it up. All right, so Demaze, I'll get to those next week. I appreciate the comments. We'll go over them. But now's the time where I want to send a little well-wishing your way. And this is the part of the show where I say, whatever you got going on in your life, keep hanging on, man. Don't give up. Keep getting up in the morning if you got to keep getting up in the morning. Keep going to work. Keep going to school. And I know that you're going to have days that just suck, man. And it's going to seem like there's no way out. And I'm here to tell you that we're rooting for you. Me and everybody at the next round. So keep at it. And I'll see you next week. Want to send some love to the patrons over at Patreon who are keeping the show alive. They are Hemrock, James, Kaiser, Sendu, and Darabka. Remember, if you want to get the show a little earlier, head over to patreon.com. Slide us a little something. I'll bring you into the inner circle. Come hang out with us. Get a cup of coffee. Hang out on a Friday night. That's all I got, everybody. Come over to the next round. See what's going on during the week. All right, I'm out.